Hey guys, Mr. Davis here. Welcome back. So you might be wondering why I'm sitting here on the periodic table for a video on ecosystems. Well, today for this video, I'm going to be actually going over some information about ecosystems, how they deal with energy and the conservation of energy, but also the conservation of mass, and the two are going to tie together a little bit. All right. So I just want to give you a quick reminder here. This is the periodic table of the elements. Hydrogen, 1, is the lightest of all the elements. Uranium, number 92, is the heaviest element naturally found on Earth. All elements that we've discovered after 92 have been created by man. They could potentially exist in space under some very specific conditions. However, they are not found naturally on Earth. All right. Okay. So, looking at this periodic table, this is everything. This is what we've got to work with. We have focused on 4 major ones for our biogeochemical cycles. But let's take a look at how these now will take a role in our ecosystems, on our planet, in our biosphere. All right. So first off, take a look at this. You remember that I talked about food chains in the last video. Well, here we're not looking at a food chain because a food chain shows just a single interaction. This right here is going to be a food web. It is a network of food chains. It's like if you had a bunch of chains all tangled together. All right. You still start out with your primary producer, the grass, but that grass is eaten by more than just one animal. So which of the organisms here is the producer? And that's going to be your grass. Which ones are going to be your consumers? Well, anything above there is going to be a consumer. So which one's your top consumer? And that's going to be your hawk. So that is your top consumer. The hawk eats highest up on this food web. All right. So let's organize this a different way. All right. We need to introduce this concept called a trophic level. All right. Now, a trophic level is the level of that food chain or food web that you're on. All right. Your first step are your autotrophs. These are the ones that make their own food, either through photosynthesis or through chemosynthesis or some other means like that. They are your producers, and they are labeled as such producers. Sometimes you'll see the name primary producers, but you need to know the first level of all the trophic levels is always the producers. Level 2 are your primary consumers. These are your herbivores. All right. These are going to be the ones that eat just the producers. All right. Now, here's the thing. They are consumers. They are the second level of the trophic pyramid, but you need to know that they are called primary consumers. Primary consumers are on the second level of the trophic pyramid. I'll say that again. Primary consumers are on the second level of the trophic pyramid. So keep that in mind when you're talking about what level and where they start. On the third level of the trophic pyramid, you have your secondary consumers. Basically you just subtract 1 at this point and they're on. So these are going to be your carnivores and generally your omnivores. So a lot of times we kind of sit somewhere around this secondary consumer level, but we're a little weird as well. Level 4. You have your tertiary consumers. Tertiary meaning 3. These are usually your top carnivore. And a lot of times we sit here as well. It really does depend on what our food choices are. So if we choose to eat something that is an omnivore or a carnivore, we're a tertiary consumer. If we eat something that's a primary consumer, we're a secondary consumer. If you are vegetarian or vegan, you might even be sitting down at a primary consumer level. All right. You, as an omnivore, have the ability to move up and down a little bit in that trophic pyramid. And those food choices can make a difference in impact on the environment. And when we talk about food, this is going to be a big deal. All right. Okay. So let's marry this to food webs. So your food web right here, where you got hawks and weasels and raccoons and mice and all that good stuff, right? Well, guess what? Those can fit really nicely right onto a trophic pyramid. So you have your producers down at the bottom. That's your grass. That's the same for both of those, right? Then your primary consumers at your second level, your primary consumers at the second level, those are going to be your herbivores. And that could include mice and rabbits, and heck, even big animals can be primary consumers, like horses. Horses are obligate herbivores. They are not omnivores. They can't eat meat, so they're herbivores. So they're obligate herbivores, but they're big animals. Heck, largest living land animal is the elephant, the African elephant. It's a primary consumer. All right. Above them, you have your primary carnivores, or more often called your secondary consumers. Now, your secondary consumers are generally going to be carnivores. They may be omnivores, and they're going to eat your primary consumers. And then above them, you have your tertiary consumers. Now, in some food webs, you can go up to tertiary quaternary, which is 4. I'm sure that pentenary consumers exist, but at that point it starts getting a little esoteric, and it applies, and what that means is it applies just to a very specific food web. All right, so you can marry these food webs to this trophic pyramid. Okay, so if we're looking at these ecological pyramids, we have a diagram here that shows the relative amount of energy or organisms contained at each trophic level of a food chain or a food web. And remember that trophic level is just the level that they're at, starting with level 1, the base being your primary consumers, or primary producers, level 2 being your primary consumers. Sorry, one take. I do this in one take. All right. So if we look at our ecological pyramid, then that's going to look at the relative amount of energy. And if you look at the mass of a pyramid, and I've got a little bit of a distorted version of it over there, but that actually illustrates my point pretty well. The biggest mass, the largest section of any ecosystem has to be your primary producers. You have to have more producers than you have consumers, all right? Because if you have more consumers than producers, you run out of those supplies. Wait a minute. Didn't we talk about this in reference to people? If you go back and you remember the ecological footprint, if you're consuming more than what the earth produces, if you're consuming more resources, more services than what the earth can produce, you run out, and then you start causing ecological damage. If you have too many hawks and not enough mice, eventually that hawk is going to run out of food and maybe has to go to a new territory, or it starves and dies. That right there is the same thing you're going to see in this ecological pyramid, and this is all about energy. This is all about the amount of available energy. So remember, Earth is a mostly closed system, so the amount of mass on the planet isn't going to change, ever. All right? You might get some small inputs from space, but they're negligible and they don't really count for this discussion. All right? The mass is going to stay the same. So the total mass of things in the biosphere is the same. However, the amount of available energy that you get from consuming food, that's what changes. So your primary producers are taking in that energy that's coming in as an input from the sun, because energy is an open system. Mass is a closed system. Energy is an open system. And then a portion of that, when those primary producers get eaten, gets passed up to the next level on the trophic pyramid. It's about 10% goes up. All right? So this is going to lead us to this next part. So if you marry these two together, you can see how that works. So it shows the relative amount of energy at each trophic level. So organisms in a trophic level use the available energy for life processes, such as growth, or photosynthesis, or cellular respiration, or metabolism. And they usually will produce as a waste product heat. This is the second law of thermodynamics. Every chemical process that happens in your body releases heat as a byproduct. So when you work out like real hard and you get all warm and hot, you're producing heat as a waste product of that metabolism action there. Okay? So that's that second law of thermodynamics. You can't reuse that heat as energy to fuel you. You can't become more energetic from your own waste heat. It doesn't work that way. All right? So that's that second law of thermodynamics, that in any energy transformation, a portion of energy is lost as heat to the surrounding environment. It doesn't disappear, it doesn't cease to exist, it just becomes unusable. So here's the rule about that. It's called the rule of 10, or the 10% rule. Know it by both of those terms, rule of 10 or 10% rule. 10% of the available energy produced within a trophic level is transferred to the next highest trophic level. Only 10%. So 90% of that energy is lost to the system, or used it within that trophic level for the purposes of growth and maintenance and waste heat and those kind of things. So only 10% moves up. So this is a cool little thing that when we start looking at, say, eating beef, it takes about 10 pounds of grass. All right, so if you've got a cow that's just out there grazing naturally, it takes about 10 pounds of grass in order for that cow to put on 1 pound of mass, of material. That's a lot. So the biomass pyramid then represents the amount of living organic matter at each trophic level. Wait, the energy and the mass are linked to each other? Heck yeah, they are! Look at that, guys! So the energy pyramid and the biomass pyramid are actually linked together. They both follow that same 10% rule, which makes it very easy for you guys to follow this. So if you've got an FRQ question or a, paper 2 question or something like that that says, oh, this, environment produces this many thousand kilocalories, how many calories go up to the, second trophic level or whatever, you just divide that by that 10%, all right? Just move the decimal place over 1, chop off a 0, whatever, all right? If they say, hey, there's this many pounds of wheat produced or whatever, and it's all fed to cows, and assuming 100% of it is fed to the cattle, then how many pounds of beef could you raise with this? Hack off that 10%. There you go. All right? That is how you can marry those two together. And you can use this to really help you out with a lot of stuff. So just keep in mind, every time you go up a trophic level, only 10% moves up. 90% of it, gone. Simple way to do this mathematically, like I said, just divide by 10. Done. Easy peasy. All right. So we compare these together. It represents the amount of energy available at each level, as well as the amount of living tissue, and both decrease as you go up that trophic level. All right, cool. Let's move on to some random facts. Random fact number 1. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Yeah, it's been around a while. But you know what? We still love her, even though she's old. Hey, random fact number 2. The solar system is formed from the remains of a massive star that went supernova. This is a massive explosion. You can see that in the background right there. The star got, basically burned out, blew up, and threw off a huge amount of mass as a byproduct. Hey, any element on the periodic table after about iron can be made only in a supernova. Whoa, wait a minute. There was a whole bunch of stuff past iron on there. There's a lot of things there. Remember, it goes all the way up to 92. Yeah, so that's a lot of stuff that's made from that supernova. Elements between hydrogen and iron are made primarily by fusing together elements that are lighter up to whatever element they get up to inside a star. This can only happen inside the heart of a star. So pretty much all the mass on Earth is here since the planet formed from that past cloud of gas and dust left over from that supernova. So that means you are literally made out of stardust. Now, the thing I want to add to this is, when I first heard this quote is, you're literally made of stardust. Act like it. Live with that, all right? Super cool. Okay, so, hey, stardust. Let me tell you what's going on. All right, so since we've talked about how you guys are all made from recycled matter from a star, then all energy is coming from a living star, and all the biomass on Earth has to move through this trophic pyramid and is just fueled by that energy from our sun. Well, then what we got to do now is we got to look at the services that your ecosystems will provide as a benefit. So let's talk about this term right here, because up next, what we're going to be talking about are the specific biomes that you will find on Earth, so your terrestrial biomes and your various aquatic ecosystems. And as we talk about them, we also need to be able to identify the key things as to why they're beneficial. All right. So these are things that the ecosystem will do that benefit us but cost us no money functionally. All right. And we can break them up into four major categories. All right. So, supporting. That's the first one I want to talk about because we've actually been talking about these already. These allow for other ecosystem services to happen. And the big one here are the biogeochemical cycles. So, like the carbon cycle is something that supports all life on Earth. It takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, it binds that carbon up into carbohydrates. Those are eaten by your primary consumers, and then that passes that energy up the trophic pyramid. Okay, great. Oxygen production. We all need oxygen to breathe. Pretty much most of the life on Earth is aerobic life. All complex multicellular life on Earth is aerobic life in some way. All right. Even plants need oxygen. All right. They perform cellular respiration. They produce oxygen that they themselves will use. Okay. Now, that being said, these are services that are absolutely critical. Us trying to do these on our own without the ecosystem doing it for us would be ridiculously expensive. And that's a big reason why we don't just suck the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere ourselves. Because it takes so much energy for us to do that, it is almost impossible to do on a large enough scale to affect any kind of global change without resorting to means that would actually be more ecologically damaging. Yeah, that's a big one. Regulating. Okay, so these are benefits from an ecosystem regulating itself. A lot of times these are negative feedback loops, which if you recall are feedback loops that are self-correcting. As it gets too warm, something happens, which cools things back down and goes back and forth. Well, this is stuff like treatment of waste or regulating climates, all right? So as waste is produced in an ecosystem, the number of decomposers you have will go up. That will mean that more nutrients will become available for the stuff that's going to use that decomposed matter. So you get more plants, and then you have more living things, and it goes down. It balances itself out. All right. Another one is regulating climate. Near coastlines, you have warm air during the day that evaporates water into the air. You get a storm, which cools off everything, and it cycles like that. All right. So these are regulating services. They try to keep everything about even. Us trying to affect the temperature of our planet any way other than just making it hotter, we really don't have a way of doing that we could do reliably. Provisioning. All right. These are products that are obtained from the ecosystem. These are things that could be food, building materials, resources for manufacturing, medicine. Yeah, medicine is one that we get a lot of from the ecosystem. So this could be stuff like going out and harvesting fish from the ocean for food for us to eat. We don't have to feed those fish that are living out in the ocean on their own. We can just grab them, eat them. They feed themselves. In fact, I'll see if I can find it, but there's a really great poster from World War II that was put out saying eat more fish because they feed themselves. This was so we could divert more grain to the war effort and provide more food for that. It's a really cool thing. All right. Cultural services then. This is the last one. This one's a little bit harder to nail down and really put a name on. All right. So the cultural services are things like sometimes we want ecosystems to be wild areas simply because they look good, because it's good that they exist. And the example that I always love for this one is the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is not producing a huge amount of oxygen for us. It is not doing a good job of filtering water for us. The Grand Canyon does not trap a huge amount of water and provide more to the aquifer. But you know what it does do? It provides a cultural value. Arizona calls itself the Grand Canyon State. The Grand Canyon was a huge catalyst for establishing conservation efforts and the national park system. The Grand Canyon is a major cultural and heritage location and a very spiritual location for a number of native peoples that live in that area. The Grand Canyon has taught us a lot about geologic time and how erosion works and things like that as a scientific benefit. But the Grand Canyon, we don't mine it for resources. We don't take rock from there. The Grand Canyon's biggest benefit is being the Grand Canyon. And that is the cultural factor there. If you look at beautiful pictures of tropical rainforests and say, wow, that's so gorgeous, I wish I could go there. You look at amazing coral reefs and you say, man, I want to go learn to scuba dive or snorkel. Guess what? It's provided a cultural service. You wanting to go scuba dive there. I want to take a trip to Hawaii so I can see the black sand beaches and then go snorkeling off of Two-Step and see the amazing coral heads there that go from 60 feet underwater all the way up to just within 10 feet of the ground and just see all the diversity of life there. Well, I'm going to go there. I'm going to spend money. I'm going to benefit the local economy. But you know what? I did all of that because of a free service of that coral reef just being a coral reef. And those are cultural ecosystem services. They're sometimes the hardest to nail down, but they're the ones that we actually appreciate the most without even realizing it. Okay, guys, that's where I'm going to end this video. And the reason why I introduced all of these ecosystem services is because up next, what I got to talk about are the different ecosystems that we find on Earth. All of the different biomes, all right? So we'll talk about forests and wetlands and all that cool stuff, all right? We're going to talk about freshwater, saltwater, and terrestrial biomes. We're going to dive into some of the things that are threats facing them, and we're also going to be talking about some of the major benefits that we get from them. I'm going to give you an overview on a lot of these and just boom, 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 introduce what they are, and then I'll have another little personal project for you, all right, where you'll have to do just a little bit of research. We'll stitch them together again just like last time. And then that's actually going to be pretty close to finishing up Unit 1. So we're going to have a review after that. All right. Well, anyway, guys, that's all for this video. You take care. I'll see you soon. Have a great day. Bye, guys.